Alfred Binet is usually given credit for having invented the modern IQ test. He was working in Paris and was asked by the school board of Paris to devise a test that could discriminate kids who would be capable of functioning normally in school from kids who would have trouble with school because of some intellectual deficiency of some sort. And he devised a test using methodologies that had been around for a while to do this, and the test worked.
Binet's test focused on elementary skills such as memory, attention, and the ability to understand similarities and differences. The tests were designed to ask the easy questions first and then gradually progress to higher levels of difficulty.
One of the things that Binet did as he had these children taking these different tests, if they succeeded at the first level, they would go to the next level and so forth and so on. What he found was that the brighter children tended to perform at the same level as an older child. In other words, a very bright 7-year-old would probably be able to perform the same level of tasks, mental tasks, as an average 9-year-old.
Binet's observations led him to the idea of assigning a mental age to each child, a number that would reflect the cognitive level at which the child was operating. Based on this evaluation, children who needed special help would be placed in classes to give them the assistance they needed. At least, that was Binet's original intention. But that focus changed with the next major incarnation of intelligence tests. Developed by Stanford University psychologist Lewis Terman in 1916, the Stanford-Binet test expanded the field of intelligence measurement.
It wasn't just to identify kids who might, through some retardation, have difficulty with school performance, but was to be administered to the general population and make discriminations among normal levels of intelligence, high to low. And then the test, of course, took on a very different cast and meaning in society than it had in the hands of Binet and the Paris School Board.
Lewis Terman believed that intelligence was an inborn fixed characteristic. He therefore designed a test that would express the level of intelligence in terms of a single number called the intelligence quotient, or IQ. The number was derived by dividing an individual's mental age by his chronological age, and then multiplying the result by 100. The new IQ test gained widespread acceptance and was used to address some critical needs.
The advantages of intelligence tests are that they provide a single summary score for each individual, which allows placement of children into appropriate classrooms. Intelligence tests show a correlation with educational attainment, occupational status, many, many things.
But it had its drawbacks.
There was a need to sort of triage personnel as they came into the Army as to those who would be most effective as officers and those who would be most benefit from training that would lead to leadership roles in the military, and those who wouldn't. And so the IQ test got sold to the United States government and the Army as an instrument that would meet that need. Another need laying around was in immigration and in the teens after World War I and in the 1920s. And this is where it had some of its more nefarious role in American history, was to be used as a way of screening certain immigrant populations from access to the United States. And as was the pattern of results in those days, Southern Europeans, Jews, Eastern Europeans did not score as well on those tests as did Northern Europeans, British and the like. And so that became a de facto means of shaping the nature of immigration into the United States.
Intelligence tests were used indiscriminately to test virtually all ages and types of people entering the country, with no adjustment made for their cultural background. To make matters worse, the Stanford-Binet test popularized the notion that people are born with a certain level of intelligence, one that rarely changes. As a result, false conclusions about the intellectual capacity of different nationalities took shape, and hostility toward the test began to spread.
Disadvantages of intelligence tests refer to the fact that they may not get at real-life intelligence in a practical sense. There have been some alternative theories proposed for that. The other difficulty that some people have with intelligence tests is that it may not give us information about every aspect of a person. Sometimes people do very well in an intelligence test, and yet in particular problem-solving situations, they may not do as well.
It wasn't until the 1950s when a psychologist named David Wexler developed a new test that things began to change. Wexler recognized that the old cookie-cutter approach to intelligence testing simply wouldn't work. The alternative he came up with came to be known as the Wexler Adult Intelligence Scale, or WAIS.
It involved both verbal tests, which is what we more commonly think of as IQ or intelligence tests, like vocabulary and so forth, verbal reasoning. But he also had what he termed the performance tests, which were more mental imagery and that kind of thing, nonverbal intelligence, spatial relations, that sort of thing. His test did give a global IQ score, but you can see the breakdown so that you can identify specific strengths or weaknesses in an individual score.
Ironically enough, and maybe Wexler developed it this way, by developing his test, he really went back to the original notion that Binet had set forth with the first intelligence test. That is, to identify the strengths and the weaknesses in an individual profile of the person taking the test.